is where justice comes in. The most realistic long-range solution to the impending dissolution of civilization is to revive the core vision of America's founders and of every world religion. This is the vision of a transcendent justice that derives from an ultimate truth beyond the power and authority of human beings. The gradual secularization of American life, public life, in recent decades has put America at odds with a vast majority of the people around the world. One can see the analogy, or one can use the analogy of two ships passing in the night. The captain of one ship has no idea where the other ship is coming from, who's in it, or where it's going, and the other ship is the same. They live in separate worlds. One ship sees a world of freedom and democracy as ultimate goals in life. The other ship regards freedom and democracy as meaningful only within a framework of justice. The other world motivated by transcendent justice is the world that gave rise over the course of a century to the American Revolution. See, Anisa and I both believe that the best strategy, the best grand strategy, is to revive the best of the past in order to shape a better future. We don't have to invent anything new. We just have to revive what has been and is disappearing. History, he declared, is not a darkening path twisting inevitably toward tyranny. It is the growing determination of men and women of all races and conditions to gain control of their own destinies. Like all of America's founders, Ronald Reagan perceived a divine destiny for America, not imposing anything, but as a moral leader. Its inspiring paradigm of this divine destiny or framework is the universal search for justice in a global revolution. That's the second American Revolution. It's a global revolution. But try to explain that to people who are in power right now. Later, on August 3rd, 1987, he gave some specifics when he welcomed the final report of the Presidential Task Force on Economic Justice, in which I was chairman of the Financial Markets Committee. The positive goal of economic justice in a world of bizarre concentration of wealth and his Star Wars initiative were President Reagan's two most revolutionary goals. His welcoming speech to this task force marked the first time in more than half a century that any American president had recognized economic justice as a universal human right. Oh, absolutely. I know all that. Guatemala, ask Noam Chomsky. He'll give 100 cases. But it's like Thomas Jefferson. He thought that slavery was an abomination, and his principles led eventually to the elimination of slavery. But he was a politician, and he was directed by others. I fault President Reagan for this. He had great ideas. He never pursued his ideas unless there was a consensus in the White House. And so he was overruled just about every time when he really followed his own instincts. I think his wife also protected him by telling him, you can't get out of line. He was the president. Many presidents are that. All presidents are that way. Let me continue. But I know what you're talking about. I agree with you. This is the problem in the White House. I mean, I was deputy director of the National Security Council. I was fired precisely because I talked about justice, and they said I was a rolling cannon on a loose cannon on a rolling deck. It was embarrassing to talk about justice if it interferes with what people for their own agendas want to do. In order to earn recognition again as moral leaders in the world, we must revive the best, as I say, of classical America. I use the word classical America, because only then can we communicate and cooperate with the best of other traditions in the world. This classical America, I think, is disappearing. So we have to revive it. Classical Islam has been dead for 6 centuries. It has to be revived, because if we revive both, we have the same thing. That's my thesis. Actually, I'm busy now writing a 5-volume scholarly comparison of classical American and classical Islamic thought, which should take about 5 years. So I'll address your very practical questions in those 5 volumes. The American classical tradition is sometimes referred to as paleoconservatism, or simply as traditionalism. It's the opposite of neoconservatism. This is distinguished from neoconservatism primarily because classical America is religious, as distinct from secular in its founding principles. In 1998, John Adams, who the year before had succeeded George Washington as America's second president, in The Great American Experiment in Self-Government, wrote, "Our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the government of any other." And his successor as the third president, Thomas Jefferson, wrote that no people can remain free unless they're properly educated, and that education consists primarily in learning virtue, and that no people can remain virtuous without a religious framework. Of course, a framework of enlightened religion, which necessarily includes the pluralist recognition that there are many different paths to awareness of God. They're all legitimate and within the divine plan of God's loving mercy, which differs considerably from the evangelical extremists who basically would like to destroy the world. It's interesting. People say that Muslims are a community of death. They don't advocate destroying the world, even the worst of them. But we have 20 million Americans who do. Europeans can't quite understand, how can this be? It's impossible. Well, it is possible. Now, in his first inaugural address on March 4th, 1801, Thomas Jefferson listed justice first as the principles that have, and I quote him, guided us through the age of revolution and reformation, followed by peace, political subsidiarity, in other words, diffuse political power, and freedom. Justice came first, freedom came last, because freedom without justice means nothing. This is a basic to the teachings of all of America's founders, and it's basic to the teachings of all the religions, too. The basic paradigm of traditionalist thought, particularly in the movement led by Edmund Burke, in the English Parliament, which gave rise to the American Revolution, is the concept of a trinity of ultimate societal goals, namely order, justice, and freedom, each of which is dependent on the other two. They're mutually interdependent. When freedom is construed to be independent of justice, there can be no justice, and the result will be anarchy. When order is thought to be possible without justice, there can be no order, because there can be no order because injustices are the principal cause of disorder. And when justice is thought to be possible without order and freedom, then the pursuit of order, justice, and freedom are snares of the ignorant. The pursuit of any one of these goals by itself is a utopian worship of a false god and is the surest road to tyranny and totalitarianism. This is sort of the core belief of what I call traditionalism. America's founders regarded justice as the queen of societal goals, whereas today justice is not even part of the establishment's political lexicon. The role of justice in classical or traditionalist American thought is evidenced in the preamble to the American Constitution, which introduced the institutional framework of American government. The Constitution did not provide a code of human rights. It provided a structure of governmental operations. But the preamble set the values. And it reads as follows: "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty due to ourselves and our prosperity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America." In modern parlance, these 5 goals in order of priority are 1, justice; 2, the rule of law; 3, military defense; 4, prosperity; and 5, freedom. In the secular public square of the last few decades, the order has been reversed. Freedom comes first, and justice is simply ignored or eliminated. The reason is simple. Without a higher source of authority beyond rule by the majority, justice can have no meaning. America's founders uniformly condemned democracy, or rule by the demos or people, as the worst form of government. The head of the minority party in Britain, Edmund Burke, feared the so-called democracy of the French Revolution, in which manipulation of the mob by an angry elite was designed to destroy all authority beyond their own tyrannical control. As George Washington stated, he was bequeathing to future generations not a radical democracy, but, as he put it, a republic if you can keep it. A republic, by definition, recognizes the ultimate sovereignty of God and the responsibility of human legislators to apply truth in the form of justice as best they can by relying on divine revelation, natural law, and human reason. These together are the sources in every religion of transcendent justice. So what are the principles of transcendent justice or transcendent law? My email, incidentally, is transcendentlaw@aol.com. It has been for about 10 years. I'm talking more about transcendent justice now because law, Islamic law, if you talk about that, Sharia, people think you want to cut their hands off. So I prefer to talk about justice and not get into that argument. Among all the legal systems of the world, the principles of transcendent justice have been best articulated, perhaps, in classical Islamic thought. These constitute a sophisticated code of human responsibilities and rights. And I've just finished a 250-page book that describes this and applies it in various places. Well, I'll go into that. The Pope sent a representative over to President Bush 3 weeks before the attack in Iraq and outlined the principles of the just war, which are in all religions. And he said, if you attack Iraq in the given circumstances, you are violating every one of the 7 principles of just war. And apparently that did not outweigh the argument of those who said that his duty is to impose American power in the world. Unfortunately, the Muslim world, particularly in Sunni Islam, less so in the Shia world, has forgotten this enlightened legal system. It's been dead for 6 centuries. The task of Muslims in the world today is to revive the best of classical Islam, as I have said, just as the task of Americans to revive the best of America, classical America. If there is to be a future for civilization, this project of reviving the best of the past must be a joint future. Among all the legal systems, I typed this out last night, okay. The starting point in reviving traditionalist justice and applying it should be recognizing that the transcendent sources in revelation, natural law, and human reason can be the starting point. The transcendent in Islam, these are known as Haq al-Yaqeen, Ayn al-Yaqeen, and Ilm al-Yaqeen. Revelation, natural law, human reason. Extremists use only one sometimes, maybe 2, but they lose balance unless they have all 3. The transcendent approach looks upon the details of the law, known in Arabic as the ahkam, or rules and regulations, from the starting point of the whole. The details can be understood and intelligently applied only as applications of higher principles. This is why we have so much extremism in the Muslim world. They're not thinking in terms of purposes and principles, in which case they have no understanding of the law. The opposite approach looks at the whole, if at all, from the starting point of the details. In the transcendent approach, analysis takes precedence over synthesis. In its opposite, synthesis takes precedence over analysis, often without any principles whatsoever. The difference in approach explains, my specialty in law school and actually throughout my life has been studying comparative legal systems, because the legal system really explains what a civilization is all about. And it also explains why a civilization rises and a civilization falls. The difference in approach explains why classical Islamic jurisprudence developed the framework of law as a code of human responsibilities and rights. It also explains why justice in English common law had to be developed outside the formal legal system as a